our questions. Question number 1. Crystal engaged in a tantrum that was maintained by attention from her parents, and it started 5 seconds after her mom walked away from her. The tantrum lasted 10 minutes. She engages in tantrums 3 times per day. What is the latency of her tantrum? Okay, so this type of question is going to give you multiple data points, multiple sets of data, and they're going to ask you to identify a certain type of data. So what do they want us to find? They want us to know the latency of her tantrum. So let's start with what is latency. Latency is the time between an SD and the start of a response. So her engaging in tantrums 3 times per day, what is that? That will be frequency, right? That is simply the count of how many tantrums she has. The tantrum lasting 10 minutes is what? Duration, the total time that a response happens or occurs is duration. So that leaves us with what? That leaves us with after her parents walked away, or after her mom walks away, the tantrum starts 5 seconds later. That would be the latency. Mom walking away is the SD. The tantrum occurring is the response. 5 seconds between the SD and the response. That is our latency. Of course, 3 seconds, which is D. There is no 3 seconds, right? But if you can break down each data point in the question, okay, it's going to be very straightforward for you. When you're studying, you want to try and do that so you can be sure you understand every piece of the question, okay? On the exam, you're only going to want to answer, obviously, what they're asking you, okay? But that's how you're going to get better. Now, understand why the wrong answers are wrong. Understand the right answers are right. Question 2. Britt is concerned about the guest list for her wedding. Several members of her family do not get along. To avoid conflict, she arranges the seating using a seating chart. Britt is using what? Okay, pretty common thing at a wedding. We're going to have a seating chart. We're going to make sure the people who get along stay together, the people who don't, right? So that's what Britt is doing. Britt is avoiding, okay, conflict. She's avoiding issues. She's avoiding these problems. What type of intervention is about preventing or avoiding? Okay, we're not reacting to it. We're trying to prevent or avoid. Is that punishment? Well, punishment is reactive. Punishment's a consequence, okay? Britt is trying to avoid needing to use consequences, right? She's doing it before the behavior happens. So punishment and consequence manipulation are obviously out. Indirect assessment, Britt apparently as the assessment's already been done, she knows the guest list, right? So she's not assessing anything. She is manipulating the antecedents, okay? She's manipulating what happens before the behavior can occur. She's manipulating the environment, right? The setup of the seating chart, everything before this behavior is occurring, all these preventative measures, okay, to ensure, okay, that no issues arise. Anything that happens after the behaviors are going to be consequences, okay? And punishment's a type of consequence, obviously. So obviously those two were wrong. Our best answer here is B, antecedent manipulation. Data that is taken before the intervention begins is referred to as what? Okay, so some of the questions on the exam would be this straightforward, right? Just a pretty basic definition question. And they want to know the data that is taken before the intervention begins. What do we consider that? So think about if you're taking data, you haven't started an intervention, okay, but you're still taking data on a skill. Why would you do that? Well, that's going to tell you where we need to start the intervention, okay? And the data that says this is where the skill is before we start teaching is referred to as what? Is it antecedent data? No, don't be confused because of before, right? Antecedent data is going to be what happens before a response, okay? But we're talking about the overall skill before the intervention begins, okay? Indirect data. This looks like direct data, right? We're not totally sure, but indirect data will be data on interviews and surveys. We're looking at the data of the skill, which means we have to directly observe it. So it can't be indirect. Irrelevant data. Well, the data is definitely relevant, okay, because we're going to use it to guide our overall intervention. So C is out. That leaves us with D, baseline data. That, of course, is our answer. Baseline is the data taken before intervention starts. It's where the skill currently sits or exists, okay, before any teaching is done. That is our baseline data. If you were to graph it, right, it would be your initial data points, and then you would have a change line, intervention would start. Greg stayed out all night with his friends when he was supposed to be at home sleeping. In the morning, his dad woke him up at 5 a.m. and had him work in the yard all day because he knew Greg was out all night. Greg no longer goes out without permission. Dad's intervention functions as what? Okay, so Greg got in trouble. Greg stayed out late all night, and his dad said, okay, I'm going to make you work in the yard. Okay, we're going to work it off. Greg, after that, said, okay, I'm no longer going out without permission. So this is a reinforcement or punishment question. What's the first question we want to ask? We want to ask about our behavior. What happens to Greg's behavior, right? The intervention, right, is the consequence. What happens to Greg going out? What says Greg no longer goes out without permission? Did Greg's behavior increase or did Greg's behavior decrease? Greg's behavior decreased. So you know it's punishment. Now we ask, okay, was the consequence, was something added or was something taken away? Well, in the morning, his dad woke him up and had him working all day, right? So this punishment was added, right? Something was added to the environment, okay? So therefore, it is what? Is it positive or negative? Positive means added, negative means taken away. So we know something was added, positive. Greg's behavior decreased, punishment. Therefore, dad's intervention functions as positive punishment. That's how you should think about every reinforcement punishment question. The more you do it, the quicker you'll get at it, okay? But remember, when you're studying, it doesn't matter how long each question takes. You want to make sure you get the question correct, and you want to know why you got it correct, and you want to know why the other answers are wrong. The more you do it, the quicker you get, and then when it comes time to take your actual exam, you'll fly through these questions, okay? The punishment questions, reinforcement questions, piece of cake, okay? But break it down, break it down, break it down. Okay, what schedule of reinforcement is most effective at maintaining behaviors? Okay, what do we mean by maintaining behaviors? Well, we mean skills and behaviors that are already taught, right? Teaching is no longer occurring, okay? But we still want that behavior to be able to happen, right? So what schedule of reinforcement would we use to maintain behaviors? Would we use CRF? What is CRF? Continuous reinforcement, right? Continuous reinforcement is an FR1, a fixed ratio 1, meaning every response is reinforced. That is very good for teaching and strengthening skills, not great at maintaining. Behaviors that are being maintained, okay, shouldn't be reinforced constantly, right? Those behaviors need to happen and sometimes not receive reinforcement, okay? That's the idea behind maintenance, that those behaviors are going to maintain for long times, even if they don't receive direct reinforcement every time. A CRF delivers reinforcement every single time. CRF good for teaching, not great for maintaining. What about FR, a fixed ratio? Okay, well, we don't exactly know what schedule we're on, right? We just know fixed ratio. Okay, so fixed ratio is obviously a set number of responses. That's better than CRF. Okay, if it's an FR20, they still have to do a lot of the behavior to get reinforcement, right? We're just not sure what it is. Okay, so FR is okay. It's an okay answer. It's better than CRF, right? But this is why you read all of your answer choices. We need the best answer. Is there a better answer, okay, for a schedule of reinforcement that is most effective at maintaining behaviors? What about VR? What do we know about a variable ratio schedule? Well, variable ratio schedules are our strongest basic schedule of reinforcement. VR is the best schedule for maintaining behaviors, okay? So VR is our answer. DRA is obviously not our answer. DRA is a differential reinforcement procedure, okay? VR is our answer. This is why you want to be sure you read all of your answer choices. FR is better than CRF, okay? But FR is not better than VR. If you would have just gone in and said, well, FR can maintain behaviors, okay? But they want the most effective. The exam wants the best answer. Don't just go in and see the first or second answer and just pick it and move on and say, okay, I'm not going to read the rest of the answer choices. I don't have enough time. You're going to have enough time, okay? If you're prepared, you have enough time. Make sure you read all the answer choices. If you would have picked FR, okay, you would have missed the best answer choice in VR, okay? So what schedule of reinforcement is most effective at maintaining behaviors? That is a variable ratio. Schedule a VR schedule. You're given a folder of data sheets containing a month's worth of data for your client. Your BCBA asks you if you can help them graph the data for a report that is coming up in a couple of weeks. The data is on a loping behavior and it is recorded every session. When you graph the data, where will you list sessions? Okay, so a lot of companies use digital data now, right? But sometimes you still might have to graph something by hand, and that's okay. Graphing is not too challenging. We use a line graph. Remember, line graphs have x-axis, y-axis. They have change lines. Okay. What is this question asking? It's kind of a convoluted, overwhelming question. Start with what the question is asking. The question is asking, when you graph the data, where are you going to list your sessions? Okay. So what do they mean by that? Well, sessions are passage of time, right? Sessions, days, minutes, any sort of passing of time goes on a certain part of the graph. Our behaviors go on a different part of the graph, right? And that's going to form our line graph, okay? So where are you going to put sessions? Do sessions go on the x-axis? Yes, right? Remember, x-axis is for time. So days, months, years, sessions, we're all going to go on that horizontal bottom axis, okay? Understand why the rest of the answer choices are wrong. This is a good example again. We know A is our answer, okay? But let's be sure. So y-axis, what goes on the y-axis? Y-axis, behaviors go on the y-axis, okay? So sessions would not go on the y-axis. Phase change line, does anything go on the phase change line? No, phase change line is just indicating, right? Something has changed in your intervention. And then baseline, what did we talk about baseline earlier? Baseline is simply the data we're taking before intervention starts. So even though A was our best answer, the x-axis is our best answer, if we go through the rest of the answer choices, we can confirm and know for sure we're right, because the other three, okay, make no sense at all. So A is our answer. We confirmed it, right? We got it right. And now we move on. Billy's grandpa gives Billy and his sisters each $100 and takes them to Target. He tells them they can buy whatever they want if they can do the math correctly on their purchases. This is an example of what? Okay, so what is Billy's grandpa trying to teach? He was trying to teach them maybe budgeting, obviously some math, okay? And he's doing that how? Is he doing this in a discrete trial format? No, right? He's taking the Target saying, here's $100, go buy whatever you want. He's not holding their hand around the store, asking for prices each time, okay? There's a lot of freedom, okay? There's not a lot of control in the environment, right? So what kind of teaching are we using here? Is Billy's grandpa shaping anything? It doesn't seem like it, right? We're not sure exactly, okay, what skill other than they're doing math he's teaching. There's no explicit approximations of the behavior, okay? So shaping probably isn't our right answer. What about incidental teaching? What is incidental teaching? Incidental teaching is another name for naturalistic teaching. Naturalistic teaching is using the natural environment, okay, as a teaching mechanism. So using naturally occurring scenarios to teach. If Billy gives each of his grandkids, or the grandpa gives Billy and his sisters each $100, okay, and he's going to use whatever comes up through their purchasing as an example of teaching. This is a great example of incidental teaching, right? Whatever naturally occurs in this scenario, he will use as a teaching training tool, right? Not like he's sitting at a table, handing them an item and having them do the math, okay? They've got free reign of the environment, free reign of the purchases, okay? And then he'll work on whatever he needs to work on. So great example of incidental teaching here. What about DRO? Is grandpa reinforcing for the absence of behavior? No, right? They need to make math correctly on their purchases. The behavior needs to be correct. And then FCT is functional communication training. It doesn't appear they're learning to communicate anything here. They're learning to spend and budget and do math. Okay, so DRO, FCT are out. This is an example of incidental naturalistic teaching. Billy's grandpa is using the environment to his advantage to teach these vital skills. Tokens and praise are typically considered generalized conditioned reinforcers. What is meant by this label? Okay, so what is a generalized conditioned reinforcer? So if we just look at the term, a conditioned reinforcer, right, is obviously something with learning history. Tokens and praise needed to be learned, right, to be established as reinforcers. Generalized means it can occur across multiple what? Multiple settings, behaviors, people. Okay, remember, think about generalizing a skill. When we generalize a skill, we want that skill to occur across multiple environments, right? So if we break it down, a generalized condition reinforcer is a learned reinforcer that can occur, right, in many, many different environments. So tokens and praise are typically considered GCRs, generalized condition reinforcers. What is meant by this? A, they can be used across multiple behaviors. Sure, you can use praise and tokens if they're conditioned to reinforce many, many behaviors. That's one of the main advantages of generalized condition reinforcers. They can be used in many situations, okay? So A is our answer, but what are we gonna do? We're gonna read all our answers. Make sure there's not a better one. They can be used across multiple settings. That looks good too, right? I can use praise in the store. I can use praise in school. I can use praise at home. So clearly that is the right answer. So B is good too. So A and B are both pretty good. What about C? They can be used in a variety of situations. Sure, I can use tokens at the table for answering questions correctly. I can use praise when we're out in public and my child is behaving. Okay, so generalized condition reinforcers are good for many behaviors. They're good across many settings, and they're good to use in a variety of situations. So that leaves us with what? D, all the above. All of these are meant by this label. Again, another great example of why you need to be reading all of your answer choices just to be sure, okay? All of these are good. D is best. Your supervisor wants you to collect baseline data on one specific skill. While you do that, the supervisor is determining what the necessary steps are to complete that skill. The supervisor also needs to identify the client's proficiency with that skill. What is most likely occurring? Okay, this is kind of a more technical question. Probably a harder question for some of you because we're really breaking down something we don't talk about a lot. Because we talk about task chains a lot as RBTs. Because as RBTs, you'll be implementing task chains. That's your job, right? Forward chaining, backward chaining, total task chaining, right? You know a lot about that. The task analysis part is more of the supervisor's role, right? The supervisor is going to be designing the task analysis. You're going to be implementing, okay? So that being said, you're collecting baseline data. What is baseline data? Baseline data is data before we teach a skill. So we're gonna know what the current level is, right? Their proficiency. While you do that, the supervisor is determining, this is the giveaway, the necessary steps to complete that skill. We need to know, in order to figure out the chain, we need to know the steps, okay? And then we're gonna identify how good are they at the skill. That's gonna help us guide our analysis. So what is most likely occurring? Are we implementing a task chain? No, we are not implementing anything yet. We are designing something, okay? Are we conducting a task analysis? Yeah, right? We need to know what is their current where are they at with the skill? So you're taking data. While you're doing that, we're looking at the necessary steps to complete the skill. That's going to be our task chain. Okay. And then how good are they at with the skill? What type of chaining is best? Forward, backwards, or total? So these are some of the steps of a task analysis. Okay. Are we determining a preference? No, we're not talking about any sort of preference assessment here. And are we identifying a function? No, no FBA, no functional analysis is occurring. Okay. So what is most likely occurring? We are B, conducting a task analysis. Again, probably a trickier question, okay, because we don't talk about it a lot as RBTs, but as a BCBA, I do a lot of these, right? So don't worry if you didn't get it wrong, but I'm trying to give you a full picture of everything that might be on the exam, okay? The more you know, the more knowledge you have, the better. Brendan selects the leftmost stimulus when presented with a field of 3 stimuli. Now Brendan is blocked from selecting the leftmost stimulus and redirected to the correct stimulus. He then receives reinforcement. What procedure best describes this scenario? So what are we trying to do? We're trying to stop Brendan from picking the left item every time. This can happen, especially in younger clients, when they are reinforced improperly and they start to learn that if they choose the left stimulus, at some point they'll receive reinforcement. We need to be careful with that, and we need to identify that. And when we do identify that, we need to fix it. Because how are we going to teach skills if they're only picking the left item and not really learning, so to speak, or trying? Well, we can block them from doing that, go to the correct stimulus, and reinforce. What are we stopping them from doing? We're stopping them from making errors. And what is that considered? Social skills training? No social skills training is occurring in the scenario as far as we know. We just know there's a field of 3 stimuli. So social skills training isn't a great answer. Response generalization. Are we trying to generalize responses from Brendan? No, we're trying to actually reduce responses, right? We're trying to reduce this leftmost stimulus response, okay? Errorless learning. What do we just say? We're trying to prevent Brendan from making errors, right? So errorless learning, pretty good, right? C so far is our best answer. Let's look at D. D, intraverbal training, okay? Are we teaching Brendan intraverbals? No, intraverbal is a verbal operant where it's a communication, right? Now what we're doing, we're trying to prevent Brendan from making errors. We are engaging in a form of errorless learning, okay? Redirecting him to the correct stimulus. C is our best answer for our final question. All right, I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. I appreciate your support. Be sure and check out all of our study materials. Any questions or comments, leave them below. I'm happy to help. Other than that, keep working hard, keep studying hard, and I'll see you soon.